Good morning, Nachum. Good Erev Shabbos, everybody. Oh my goodness. Tomorrow we have the privilege of reading Parshas Vayishlach. Rav Soloveitchik, Zechron Livracha, when he discussed Parshas Vayishlach, he called it the Parsha of confrontation. Namely, that Yaakov meets up with his brother Esav after over 20 years, that Yaakov has been away by Uncle Lavan, and Yaakov prepares in 3 ways to meet his brother, both with number 1, Doron, to send him a gift, Tefillah, he prays to Hashem, and finally he prepares for Milchama, in the eventuality that there will be a military encounter between the 2 brothers. We know that on the night before the meeting of Yaakov and Esav, the Torah tells us in chapter 32, Pasuk 25, Vayivaser Yaakov levado. Yaakov was left alone, and Vayeyovek ish imo, and a man wrestled with him ad alos hashachar, literally until dawn. Okay, now the idea is, who is this ish? So Rashi tells you that this was, he quotes the Gemara in Chulin Tzadi Aleph that tells us that this was the sorrow shel Esav, as found in Bereshis Rabbah, Ayin Zayin Gimel 77, paragraph 3. That this is the Sar shel Esav. What does that mean? That every nation has its guardian angel upstairs, and this was the guardian angel of Esav, disguised as a man, that Yaakov fought with him, but really a superhuman power, hence the name, that his name is changed, as foretold by the Malach, to Yisrael Kisorisa, because you literally wrestled im Elokim, with an angel of God, b'manoshim, and with man, vatuchal, and you become victorious. You've prevailed. Now, what in the world is going on? The Torah tells us that at this wrestling match, the angel saw in verse 26 that he could not overcome him. So Vayiga Bekaf Yerecho, he struck the socket of Yaakov's hip, Vateka Kafira Yaakov. So Yaakov's hip socket was dislocated as he wrestled with him. And as a result, the Torah tells us several verses later, in 32, verse 33, therefore, the Torah tells us the children of Israel are not to eat the displaced sinew on the hip socket to this day, because he struck Yaakov's hip socket on the displaced sinew. And this is the 3rd mitzvah as found in the book of Bereshis. The first mitzvah in Bereshis is pru'avu, procreation, to have children. The second mitzvah in chapter 17 is the mitzvah of circumcision. And this, the 3rd and final mitzvah, the prohibition of eating the gid hanoshe, the displaced sinew on the hip socket. Now, just be aware that the idea of the Jew not eating filet mignon is often not considered kosher because it's from the hind quarters of an animal which contain the forbidden sciatic nerve, the gid hanoshe, and we can't eat the gid hanoshe. Removing these difficult, specific parts is very difficult and laborious. The process is called nikur, which is why non-kosher butchers typically sell the entire hindquarters to non-Jews. There is a tradition among the Teimanim that they have a precise process of nikur, but just be aware that it's very difficult and therefore oftentimes a part that we do not eat. I'd like to share with you the chinuch as to why we don't eat the gid hanoshe. And he writes very clearly, at the root of this precept lies the purpose that Jewry should have a hint that even though they will endure great tribulations in the exiles at the hands of the nations and the descendants of Esav, in other words, just as Yaakov wrestled with the angel, the guardian angel of Esav, so too will Yaakov's descendants endure great difficulties, challenges, persecutions from Esav. They should remain assured that they will not perish, but their progeny and name will endure forever, and a Redeemer will come and deliver them from the oppressor's hand. Remembering this matter always through the precept, which is not to eat the gid hanoshe, which will serve as a reminder that they will stand firm in their faith and righteousness forever. Whoa. So the idea behind this is that the descendants of Esav will inflict pain and suffering on the descendants of Yaakov. But ultimately, we and they, the descendants of Yaakov, will be rescued from them, just as we find that the son later on in this chapter, Pasuk 32, tells us, Vayizrach lo hashemesh, that the sun rose for him and healed him, okay, and he was delivered from the pain. So too writes the chinuch, the son of the Mashiach will shine for us, and he, the Mashiach, will heal us from our suffering and redeem us. Amen. Kain yehi ratzon b'mheira b'yameinu. This is going to happen swiftly in our day. Wow. So ultimately, the gid hanoshe has a positive message. Don't eat the gid hanoshe, because just as Yaakov was only wounded, so too the progeny of Yaakov will only be wounded, will be wounded in one of two ways, either Chanukah, whereby they will attempt to assimilate us, and therefore we will deviate from our Yahadus, or, God forbid, they will Purim us and try to kill us, as did Haman. Frekt Rav Moshe Feinstein in his Dorash Moshe, excuse me, when we have a remembrance of a miracle, and this indeed was a miracle, that Yaakov wasn't harmed, so why do we eat matzah? Why do we eat maror? We eat matzah to remember that we were pushed out of Egypt, and therefore we tell the story how God hastened our deliverance, etc. And why do we eat maror? Because the Egyptians embittered our lives. Asks Rav Moshe, the same thing should be over here. We should specifically eat the Gid Hanoshe to remind us, wow, Yaakov was saved when he was only hit in the hip, and we therefore should eat the hip in order to remind us that Am Yisrael Chai, Yaakov survived miraculously, and we too will survive throughout the Golus. And Rav Moshe answers very sharply by saying the following: we don't want tests. We don't want to be tested and see if we can pass these tests. And therefore, it's best not to positively remember, but we abstain from eating. And therefore, we much prefer not to have these tests. As we daven every day in Birkas HaShachar, Shalo Tibienu Lo Lidei Nisoyon, don't bring us to tests. And so too in our exile, we don't want to be tested. And therefore, the remembrance of the miracle is done through abstaining, and not in a positive way, not by eating the Gid Hanoshe, to demonstrate that even though we are so grateful to Hashem for saving Yaakov and his descendants throughout Jewish history, to show that even though we are so grateful, we don't want this. As the Talmud in Brachos teaches in Brachos 5b, regarding the trials and tribulations of the Golus, Lohein v'lo schoron. We don't want them nor the reward. Even though that if and when these rewards happen, these punishments happen, we accept it ba'ava, but we don't want it, and therefore there's no positive observance. This is what Rav Moshe writes in his Sefer Dorash Moshe. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh, in his commentary on the Torah, on the verse that the Jewish people are not to eat the Gid Hanoshe, writes the Orach Chaim the following: because Yaakov's sciatic nerve was dislocated, and listen carefully, Visholat bo haklipa, in the place where it was, what does Esav put? He puts klipa. B'chinazu b'chol makom shehi nitma'a, meaning that impurity, the culture of Esav, was indoctrinated into Yaakov, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu forbids us from partaking of this, because, listen carefully, he quotes the famous Gemara in Chulin that Ein begid no sein tam. There's no tam, there's no taste to the Gid Hanoshe, to the sciatic nerve. Another explanation could be, al pidrush, there's no reason for this. And that's why in this parsha, amazing, when the two brothers meet, so the Torah says that they literally, when Esav and Yaakov meet, the Torah says, Vayishokehu, and he kissed him. And my friends, you'll take a look in every Torah where the word Vayishalkehu and he kissed him appears, in every Torah there are dots over every letter. And Rashi said, why are these nekudos there? And he gives two interpretations. Either that just this one time, either he kissed him 1 second, but this was a chance happening, because Rashi quotes Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, buried in Meron, halacha. There is a law similar to the concept of halacha l'Moshe Sinai, built into nature, that what Esav sone liYaakov, Esav hates Yaakov, and therefore the idea is that we don't perpetuate the eating of this, rather we abstain from any and all interaction between the culture of Esav and the culture of Yaakov. We don't want the tumah of Esav that was implanted in the place of the Gid HaNosheh, and therefore we abstain from eating the Gid HaNosheh. It's interesting, this story is not simply historical, it's current events. We are living in a world of halacha, Esav sone liYaakov. We've seen the ugly head of anti-Semitism, especially after October 7th, rise all around the world. And the lesson of the Gid HaNosheh is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu protected us then and protects us now. But in order for us to be merited with the protection from the negative culture of Esav, is to remember that the best offense is a good defense. By providing our children with the pride of being Jewish, with the awareness of what we have to do to remain the Am Levodad Yishkon, the nation that truly lives alone. This is the destiny of Klal Yisrael, and this is the story of Yaakov's wrestling with the Tsar, or the guardian angel of Esav. Remember, the Chinuch says, we are promised, strong word, that as Yaakov won and he was cured from his limping, so too will the children of Yaakov win and be cured from all our limping. Shabbat shalom to all.